"Sir, this section is for family only. Please step back or security will escort you." That's all they said. No hello, no glance at the paper in his hand, just those cold, rehearsed words. He didn't argue. He simply stood there in silence, shoulders back, hands folded neatly behind him, wearing an old, faded Marine Corps jacket, its brass buttons dulled, seams fraying. In his hand, a single, crumpled card, written in blue ink, barely legible anymore. "Dad, I want you in the front row." But to them he was nobody. Just a man with no badge, no suit, no name worth recognizing. What they didn't know was that 6 men seated quietly in the 5th row, men with no rank on display, were watching everything. And when they stood up, the entire room shifted, and no one would ever forget what followed. Thank you for being here. Sometimes, the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning. Today's story is one of those. Quiet, powerful, and worth remembering. If it touches your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next one. Now, let's take a closer look at what really happened. The morning sun crested gently over the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting a soft golden hue over the sleepy town of Fairgrove, Virginia. At the heart of the quiet valley, nestled between old maples and stone buildings older than the town charter itself, sat Wellington College, an ivy-trimmed liberal arts school with just enough prestige to inspire pride and just enough tradition to foster blindness. On that June morning, the school parking lot buzzed with families pulling up in minivans and SUVs, balloons tied to side mirrors, proud banners flapping in the breeze. Mothers fixed ties, fathers wrestled with camera settings, and grandparents held up programs with trembling hands to find their loved one's name. One of those programs was clenched tightly in the hands of Linda Everett, a woman in her early 50s with gentle eyes and a steel spine. She'd worked double shifts to get her son through college. His name, Aiden Everett, was printed halfway down the second column on page 3. Below it, Dean's list. She'd stared at those words every day for the past month. Wellington's main auditorium, a red, brick colonial hall with wooden seats and echoing rafters, was already humming with pre-ceremony noise by the time Linda made her way inside. Ushers in white gloves directed guests down velvet, carpeted aisles. Floral arrangements framed the stage. Jazz music whispered through the speakers. Linda was guided to the 5th row, center left, and she was pleased. A perfect view of the stage. But Linda, being a people watcher, found herself less interested in the students and more drawn to the audience around her. There was joy, pride, and in some cases, carefully concealed anxiety. But then, she noticed something off. A figure had just entered, not from the main doors like the others, but from a side entrance near the emergency exit. He moved slowly, deliberately, with the posture of someone not lost, but waiting. His dress was simple and old, sun-faded Marine Corps dress jacket, brass buttons dulled. Fabric stretched across the shoulders like it had been borrowed from a younger version of himself. His jeans were worn, his boots scuffed, and his hands, clasped behind his back, seemed more disciplined than decorative. Linda's first thought wasn't pity. It was curiosity. Who comes to a place like this alone, dressed like that, with such stillness? The man walked toward the front section, where chairs were marked by silver placards that read, "Reserved Family of Honorees." He paused beside one seat at the end of the aisle. Then came the confrontation. A young woman in a headset, holding a clipboard like a badge of authority, stepped in front of him. "Sir, this section is for designated family only. You'll need to stand clear or security will escort you." The old man didn't argue. "My son's graduating today," he said calmly. "He asked me to sit in the front." But she didn't check her list. She didn't look at the letter he held out. She simply pointed toward the back. "I'm sorry. If you don't have a pass, you'll need to step aside." And so he did. One quiet pace back. No resistance. No fuss. Just silence. Linda noticed. So did 6 men a few seats to her right, quiet, broad-shouldered men in civilian clothes, seated close together but not speaking. Their gazes followed the old Marine with an intensity that said, "We know exactly who he is." The Marine took up position against the far wall, just beneath the EXI sign, his back to the wood paneling, his eyes fixed on the stage. hands still behind him. The ceremony began. The dean made a joke about student loans. Polite laughter rippled through the room. Parents wiped away tears. Camera shutters clicked. But Linda couldn't stop watching the man at the back. She leaned over slightly and whispered to a nearby administrator wearing a school badge. "Do you know who that man is?" The woman glanced back, shrugged. Probably someone who wandered into the wrong section. These ceremonies always bring in extras. Extras, the word sank into Linda's stomach like a stone. This wasn't a man who wandered. He was rooted, planted, like he belonged in ways that piece of laminated paper could never define. From time to time, the woman with the headset glanced back nervously. A second usher now stood beside her. Linda overheard a whisper. "He's still standing there. Should we have security move him?" The old man didn't flinch. Didn't break eye contact with the stage. Didn't adjust his coat or shift his weight. He just waited, as if he'd waited all his life to see what came next. A student speaker took the podium, the son of the dean. Polished, charming, perfect diction. He thanked the faculty, praised the parents, quoted a few choice authors. But then, a joke, and a special thanks to the presentable families seated right up here in the front row, reminding us all what real college values look like. Laughter, scattered but audible. Linda didn't laugh. The man at the back didn't laugh. Neither did the 6 quiet men in the 5th row. One of them leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing beneath a baseball cap. "That was for him," he muttered. The others nodded, not angrily, just knowingly, like men who'd seen this sort of thing before. Linda's jaw tightened. She looked again toward the man by the wall. Still standing, still silent, still holding something invisible, but unmistakably heavy. It was clear now. No one had invited him with a formal pass. No one had recognized his face or remembered his name. But Linda Everett knew deep in her bones, someone had made a terrible mistake. The list of graduates moved on, one name after another echoing through the auditorium as camera flashes punctuated the announcements like tiny fireworks. A mother 3 rows up wept into a handkerchief. Somewhere near the balcony, a toddler squealed at the sound of applause. But Raymond Cole didn't move. That was his name. The old Marine by the wall. The man they turned away. The father standing vigil in a room that pretended not to see him. His left shoulder sloped downward from an old injury. His chin was lifted just enough to carry dignity, and his gaze remained fixed on the stage like it was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. And still, no one came to make space. No one offered him a seat. Not even after everything. Linda Everett sat frozen, eyes bouncing between the program and the man. She was no stranger to pride. But this wasn't pride. This was reverence. And it was being ignored. 2 ushers whispered nearby, glancing nervously over their shoulders at Raymond. One of them now held a clipboard. They approached him again. "Sir, I need you to come with us." Raymond turned slowly, his voice low but unwavering. "I'm not causing trouble. My son asked me to be here. I'm not leaving until I see him walk that stage." The usher stepped back, uncertain. A security officer began moving down the aisle with firm steps, eyes locked onto the Marine's worn boots. Linda could feel her pulse rising. She glanced around. No one else noticed. Parents were busy adjusting their tripods, grinning at their phones, angling for the best shot of their graduate. The old man had become wallpaper, an inconvenience, a disruption to be managed, not understood. But then, from row 5, one of the quiet men stood. He wore jeans and a plain jacket, baseball cap pulled low, his eyes ice blue, fixed like a rifle scope on the guard approaching Raymond. He stepped into the aisle. Then another man stood, then a third, until 6 of them were on their feet, rising in slow, synchronized defiance, like a silent battalion reassembling. No one spoke. Not yet. Linda held her breath. The first man approached the Marine, not flanking him, not shielding him, standing with him. He reached into the inside of his jacket and pulled out something small. He held it up, catching the overhead lights. Gold blinked. Silver wings, the Navy SEAL trident, a seal of quiet authority. Not decorative, not for ceremony, earned. The security guard paused mid-step, eyes falling on the badge. The man's voice came, steady and clear, like thunder hiding behind a whisper. "This man doesn't leave this room. He led us through hell. He stays right here." Gasps stirred in the front rows. Murmurs rippled, soft as wind against wheat. The usher stepped back. The clipboard in her hand began to tremble. Linda turned, watching it unfold like a courtroom drama, except there was no performance here. Just truth, just service, just justice long overdue. A fourth man joined the formation, then a fifth, all with the same mark. All quiet, all still. Raymond didn't gloat, didn't lift his head. He just held out a folded card, soft from being read too many times. "My son sent this," he said quietly. On the card, scrawled in blue ink, "Dad, I want you in the front row." The usher stared at it, but didn't move. Her eyes blinked rapidly. She didn't know what to say. Her authority had just collapsed under the weight of unspoken history. Then, from the far corner of the room, a voice. Worn but unmistakably official. "I know that man." A single figure stood. Colonel Henry Maxwell, U.S. Army retired, medals glinting beneath his blazer. He walked slowly toward the center aisle, stopping just behind the seals. "That man is Master Sergeant Raymond Cole, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, United States Marine Corps. In 2006, during Operation Firewatch, he ran into a burning compound under enemy fire and dragged out 5 Marines. No orders, no backup. Just fire. Just instinct. He's the only one who came back." The room was silent now. Silent in the way churches go silent after a funeral prayer. In the way battlefields fall still when dust settles on sacrifice. Raymond didn't shift. Didn't make eye contact with anyone. He just waited. Until the sound of soft footsteps echoed behind the rows of graduates. A young man in cap and gown had stepped from the back of the stage, moving quickly toward the podium. His movements were unsteady, but determined. He didn't wait for the announcer. He didn't wait for the dean. He just stepped up to the microphone and spoke. "That's my dad," gasps again, this time louder. The young man looked barely 22, his gown slightly wrinkled, his voice trembling but clear, and never wanted attention. "Every morning growing up, he told me the same thing: stand tall. Keep going. Be someone you'd be proud to look in the eye." Today, I'm not proud because of this degree. I'm proud because of him. He stepped down from the stage, moved down the aisle, past the camera phones, past the families who suddenly understood. He stopped in front of his father, and without a word saluted. Raymond didn't return the salute. He stepped forward and wrapped his son in a hug. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was real. And that's why the entire auditorium broke open in a way no speech could ever accomplish. Linda blinked rapidly. A tear slipped before she could stop it. She hadn't expected to cry today. She hadn't expected the world to tilt. One by one, the 6 Navy SEALs straightened their spines and, together, raised their hands in salute. To their former leader. To the man who brought them home. To the one who almost got pushed out of his son's greatest moment. Behind them, the crowd slowly stood. Not out of duty, out of respect. And for the first time in an hour, every eye in the room looked toward the man in the Marine jacket. The applause began slowly, not the rowdy kind reserved for touchdowns or standing ovations. This was something quieter, deeper, like a whispered prayer turning into a drumbeat. It started with a single pair of hands clapping near the center aisle, then another, and soon, the entire auditorium was on its feet. There were no cheers, no hoots or whistles, just reverent, grounded applause. The kind meant not to celebrate, but to apologize. Linda Everett stood too, her palms coming together not just in admiration, but in remorse. Her eyes were glassy, her throat tight. Because she'd seen it unfold from the very beginning. She'd watched them try to erase a man with a clipboard and a dismissive glance. And now they couldn't unsee him. The woman who had earlier blocked Raymond Cole's path stared down at her clipboard like it had betrayed her. Her hands trembled. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. The security guard who had tried to remove him. He stepped back slowly into the wings, disappearing into the hallway without a sound. And Raymond, he didn't move yet. He just held his son, Lucas, in the same quiet, steady way he had held everything his whole life, with control, with presence, and without needing to prove a thing. Lucas pulled back gently, brushing a hand over his gown. "Come on, Dad. Let's go where you were always meant to sit." And, together, they turned. They began walking down the center aisle, side by side. Raymond's boots didn't thud. They made no noise, but the room felt each step like thunder wrapped in velvet. As they passed each row, people shifted instinctively, clearing a path, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. Linda noticed that no one dared meet Raymond's gaze, not out of fear, but out of the humbling realization that they had missed him. Not just physically, but spiritually. When they reached the front section, the same rope and placard that once symbolized rejection now seemed hollow. The usher, the one who had waved him away, didn't even look up. She stepped aside like the wind had pushed her. No resistance, just silence. And space. Raymond sat down beside his son in the second row, center left. The same place he had tried to claim with a handwritten invitation. He didn't smile. Didn't nod in triumph. He just folded the card back into his coat pocket, near his heart, where it had always belonged. Behind them, the 6 seals remained standing. They didn't return to their seats. They didn't need to. Their place was behind him, not beside, not in front behind, where they had always been. The ceremony resumed. But everything had changed. The dean returned to the podium, his usual confidence suddenly missing. He cleared his throat. "Well, are honored today to welcome guests of great distinction. Some we failed to recognize soon enough." A pause, a few claps, then more. But everyone in the room knew. The applause wasn't for the dean. It wasn't for the faculty. It wasn't even for the graduates. It was for the man who had come with nothing but a folded card and the kind of quiet dignity the world forgets how to see. Linda blinked fast, trying to clear her vision. She looked again toward Raymond. He wasn't basking in the moment. He wasn't milking the attention. He just sat, steady, anchored, whole. The ceremony finished with the usual pomp. Hats flew into the air. Families rushed to take pictures. Ushers relaxed their shoulders. But Linda stayed in her seat. She wanted to see what happened after the lights dimmed. And what she saw, she'd never forget. Students began passing Raymond's seat. Some stopped to shake his hand. Some simply laid a hand on his shoulder, no words. Just presence. One young woman, mascara streaked from crying, paused long enough to whisper, "Thank you for carrying them." Raymond didn't reply. He nodded slightly, but even that looked like a blessing. Linda watched as the 6 seals formed a half circle nearby. They didn't speak. But one of them, the youngest, stepped forward and placed something in Raymond's hand. A coin, small, heavy. Linda recognized it, a challenge coin they were never given lightly, and almost never in public. Raymond turned it over. On one side, the emblem of their SEAL team. On the other, 5 engraved words. "The quiet ones lead the loudest wars." He closed his hand around it, and just for a moment, Linda swore his shoulders softened. Not because something had been taken, but because something had been shared. That mattered. That meant everything. Later, as the crowd filtered out, Linda walked slowly toward the exit. She paused by the door, turned back one final time. There, in the quiet hush of a clearing room, she saw them. The boy who gave up his moment for his father. With the 6 men who stood in silence, ready to fight without raising a fist. And the man who had been turned away, then welcomed without ever asking. And she whispered, not aloud, but into the silence of her heart. He didn't come to demand anything. He just came for a seat. But by the time he left, the entire room stood for him. By the time the chairs were being folded and the floral arches gently dismantled, most of the families had long gone, off to brunches, backyard parties, and Instagram-worthy photo ops. But Linda Everett remained. She sat quietly in the 5th row, center, left, with her purse in her lap and her heart still unsteady. She wasn't waiting for someone. She was waiting for stillness. That sacred moment after the applause, when the truth becomes loudest. Raymond Cole was still seated up front, his shoulders straight, his son beside him, their hands resting on their knees. They weren't speaking, but they didn't need to. Some bonds don't require words. Then it happened. Something soft. Something real. A line of students, one by one, began to pass his seat. No fanfare, no faculty announcement, no reminder from a microphone. Just gratitude. Some graduates paused, shook his hand. Some simply placed a palm on his shoulder and nodded. Some whispered, "Thank you." Some didn't say anything at all, and that somehow felt louder than words. One young man, tall, slender, African-American, with honor cords around his neck, paused long enough to say, "I never met my dad. But today I feel like I did." Raymond looked up for the first time and nodded once. It was quiet, but in that quiet, something sacred lingered. Linda watched it unfold and realized this wasn't just about a graduation. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about what we choose to see, who we choose to honor, and how many times we mistake dignity for disruption when it doesn't come dressed the way we expect. As the final few guests trickled out, one of the Navy SEALs approached Raymond once more. He held out a small black velvet box. Inside was another coin. This one was different. Raymond took it gently, his fingers calloused from decades of labor. He turned it over. On one side, the crest of their unit. On the other, a date. No words, just numbers. Raymond inhaled sharply. It was the day he saved them. Without saying a word, he closed the box and pressed it to his chest. The young SEAL saluted once, then turned and left. Linda finally rose from her seat. She walked toward Raymond, slowly, respectfully, like approaching a flame that had quietly kept a room warm long before anyone realized it. "Excuse me, Mr. Cole." He turned, eyes steady, expectant. "I just wanted to say I saw what they didn't." From the beginning, Raymond gave her the faintest smile. That's all it takes sometimes. One person willing to look. She swallowed hard. "Thank you. For everything," he nodded. "I didn't do anything today." "No," Linda said, smiling through tears. "You showed us what we forgot." Outside the auditorium, the clouds had gathered low. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance, but the air remained warm, thick with the kind of meaning that only comes after something real has passed through a place. Raymond and Lucas stepped out into the courtyard together. A breeze picked up. Lucas held the door for his father, not as a gesture of politeness, but as a statement of respect. They didn't head toward the parking lot immediately. Instead, they paused near the Veterans Memorial, an old bronze plaque surrounded by flower beds. Raymond took the folded card from his coat one last time. He read the words slowly, like a man reading scripture. "Dad, I want you in the front row." He looked at Lucas. "You gave me that?" Lucas shook his head. "No, Dad, you earned that. I just reminded them." A few weeks later, a photograph from that day made its way into the alumni newsletter. It wasn't staged. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even posed. It showed Raymond standing quietly with Lucas in front of the stage, flanked by 6 men in civilian clothes, their hands at their sides, their eyes watching him, not the camera. No caption, no headline, just a quote at the bottom. In the back of the room stood the kind of man you never forget. And for once, everyone saw it. In our loudest moments, we often overlook the quiet ones. The ones who don't raise their hands, who don't demand recognition, who carry not just their own weight, but the weight of those around them. Raymond Cole didn't come for applause. He didn't come to make a scene. He came because his son asked. Because love doesn't need credentials. And yet, by the time he left, an entire room had risen, not for his title, not for his medals, but for his truth. Because even in a world that sometimes forgets, honor never does. Sometimes, the people who've sacrificed the most are the ones who speak the least. They don't chase the spotlight. They don't ask to be noticed. They just show up, with a worn jacket, a folded card, and a heart full of stories we'll never fully understand. Raymond Cole didn't stand at the back of that room because he didn't belong. He stood there because the world often forgets how to recognize quiet greatness. Until it has no choice. But when truth finally stood up in that auditorium, in the form of 6 SEALs, a whisper from a son, and a room that remembered how to feel, dignity was restored. Not because Raymond demanded it, but because he'd already earned it. Let this remind us, don't measure people by their clothes or the badges they carry. Don't overlook the quiet ones. They might be carrying the weight of entire generations. And never underestimate the power of one handwritten note or the courage it takes to simply stand and wait. Because sometimes the seat someone is denied becomes the moment that lifts us all. Thank you for staying with us through this story. If it stirred something in your heart, let it stay a while. Let it shape how you see the quiet ones. Let it remind you, kindness often lives in the shadows, and reverence doesn't need volume to be felt. Please feel free to leave a comment below. What did this story mean to you? And if you'd like more stories like this, real, human, unforgettable, you're warmly invited to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss one. Because here, we don't forget the ones who stood in the back until the room stood for them.